Tonight we'll be talking about concentration, and chanting is actually quite conducive because we just bring our whole body, heart, mind into the activity. And as some of you know, because we've been doing it forever for these Buddhist studies classes, we'll chant the refuges and precepts. And for those of you online, I just put it into the chat there so you can have it. So I'll ring the bell 3 times to begin. Chanting the 3 refuges slowly. So this is not the traditional way of chanting, but it allows us to come together as a group. Buddham saranam gacchami, dhammam saranam gacchami, sangham saranam gacchami, dutiyampi buddham saranam gacchami, dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami, dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami, tatyampi buddham saranam gacchami, tatyampi dhammam saranam gacchami, tatyampi sangham saranam gacchami. And we'll settle into our sitting time now. Scanning through the body as an act of kindness, noticing where there's holding that maybe is extra, like around our eyes, checking the mouth and jaw and the tongue, checking the hands, and around the throat, shoulders, the abdomen, and the floor of the pelvis. These are common places where we just tend to hold tension that's not serving any purpose, just habit. maybe other places that you know of. So with kindness, just check in. And one of the great insights, the great laws that we uncover in our practice is that we have to give the mind something to do. Otherwise, it's going to do what it normally does. It will worry, it will plan, it will compare, it will problem solve, it will fantasize, etc. So we train the heart to be interested in the meditation object. That could be something simple like being interested, being intimate with the experience of the body sitting. Or it could be more specific, just interested in the breathing in and the breathing out as a natural process. So that means we're not controlling the breathing rhythm, but observing how the breath comes in naturally, how the breath goes out. And when we train the heart to be interested in something ordinary, like breathing in and breathing out, and there is a real full, ongoing attentiveness, then quite naturally the mind isn't doing other things. And we begin to experience the mind that is empty of worrying and planning and comparing and all the other things that the mind would go into because of habit. So pick up one of these trainings and let it be done with relaxation. We just simply are interested in the sensations of breathing in from the beginning to the end of the inhalation, from the beginning until the end of each exhalation, as if it were the most important thing right now. Just to be present, to be receptive, to be interested in the ordinary sensations of breathing in and breathing out. Unwavering, which means not forgetting the meditation object. And this is quite literally a real joy if we really give ourselves to it. And simply begin again and again as many times as needed. So in a relaxed way, we're cultivating this unwavering interest, attentiveness to the natural process of breathing in and breathing out. Some of you may feel this movement down in the belly as a rising and falling. Others feel it maybe at the nostrils or in the chest. The important thing is to be interested and unwavering in this interest. And to begin to feel, once you get a little momentum, a kind of refinement. We call this in Buddhism the pleasure of seclusion. The mind being more and more secluded from its normal activity of worrying and planning and thinking about this and that. And it's a real, actual felt sense, this pleasure of seclusion. We learned quite a bit about the skillful way to be relating to distraction. How easy it is to judge ourselves or to get upset, which of course is just furthering the distractedness. And it's possible to just acknowledge that the mind has gotten entangled in thought, and that knowing that is already being present, and then beginning again. Breathing in, experiencing the whole body just as it is. Breathing out, experiencing the whole body just as it is. So same practice, just with a more inclusive awareness of the whole body, but still centering the breath. The sensations of breathing in, the sensations of breathing out, but including the experience of the whole body as you breathe in and as you breathe out. It really helps to be relaxed. Doesn't require directing the attention, it's more receptive. Breathing in, experiencing bodily calm. Breathing out, experiencing bodily calm. So however faint it might be, as you breathe in, just sense that embodied well-being. Wherever you feel it, just appreciating this sense of bodily calm as you breathe in, as we breathe out. Leaving everything else behind. So instead of the habit we might have of noticing where the body feels unhappy, uncomfortable, tune in to where there is some ease in the body, some calm, some sense of well-being. Just breathing in, feeling that as you feel the in-breath, sensing that well-being as you feel the out-breath. So in a sense, the heart is harmonizing with the body, not in conflict at all. As it breathes in and breathes out, there's a really beautiful integration of the knowing, sensitive heart being with the body as it is. With each inhalation, and then with each exhalation. And you can use a phrase if that's helpful. It can even be something like, "Yes, honey, I'm here for you," as you breathe in. And "Yes, honey, I'm here for you," as we breathe out. Just a way to encourage this sense of bodily well-being. The mind not being in conflict with the body. And if possible, letting the heart bloom into a simple joy, breathing in, experiencing joy, that lightness of heart, breathing out, experiencing joy, this joyful interest, this buoyant quality of glee. So you can even use the word joy as you breathe in, experiencing joy as you breathe out. And again, we're not forcing anything, we're just learning to be interested in what's here. as if there were a bright, lovely smile as we breathe in joy, and that smile as we breathe out, experiencing joy. Let it spread, feel it throughout the body, just that lightness of heart. And the next instruction the Buddha offers is breathing in, experiencing this ease of contentedness. Breathing out, experiencing this ease of contentedness. We're sensing the heart's willingness just to be, not needing things to be different. Notice the simple pleasure of the heart's ease, the heart's contentment. And the quietude that comes from that. And finally, for the last minute or two, breathing in, sensing the vast silent space of the heart as you breathe in, sensing the silence and stillness as you breathe out, as if we're noticing not the activity here in the moment, but the space as you breathe in, as you breathe out, the silent, peaceful, still space of the present moment. Moment, stretch out a little. And welcome everyone, all of you online and folks in the room. Good to be here. Thankful for Shelley covering last week. And just so you folks know, Shelley's 5-week Buddhist Studies class, it's going to begin, I think it's the 20th of October, 5-week class starting on Monday, the 20th of October. Registration's available for that now, so you can just go online, and I'll try to remember to put it into the weekly email next Monday when I send it out to everybody. And also, while I'm doing an announcement, once again, Carlos and Rafi right here in the room, people online can't see, but they've been organizing a practice group out at the retreat center for some of our Buddhist studies classes. So once again, this fall, they're going to do it Thursday of Thanksgiving, the 27th, right? Until Sunday. Yeah. Yeah, so either starting Thursday night or Friday. But anyway, I put the registration in the email today. You can find out more about that, or just contact Gabe in the office if you have questions. People here in the room, you can check in with Rafi and Carlos. But they'll curate some talks from Dharma Seed on the subject of path. We've been doing the gradual path this 5-week, and then Shelley in the next 5-week class is going to cover the Eightfold Path, so a different way the Buddha talked about the spiritual path. So it's a nice chance to get out to the retreat center, do a little practice, get to know the community members, and there will be some conversations about the topics we've covered this fall and some talks and chance to be out in nature at our beautiful retreat center. So we've been moving through the gradual path, I'm sure you've noticed. And one of the passages from the Dhammapada, just as an arrowsmith shapes an arrow to perfection, so does the wise person shape the mind, which is fickle, unsteady, vulnerable, and erratic. How good it is to rein the mind, which is unruly, capricious, rushing wherever it pleases. Sound familiar? The mind so harnessed will bring one happiness. Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts. A well-directed mind creates more well-being than even the loving action of parents toward their children. A wise person should pay attention to the mind, which is difficult to perceive. It is extremely subtle and wanders wherever it pleases. The mind well guarded and trained will bring one happiness. And one of the things about a passage like that is you get the flavor just in how the Buddha is talking about it, like to begin to relate to the conditioning, the habits of our mind as nature. It's not personal. As I often say, we didn't go through some cosmic buffet line and choose the inclinations, the underlying tendencies, the habits for our mind. I mean, I didn't, right? But there they are. We see them, we experience them so clearly, so obviously. And you may think it's, this passage from the Dhammapada, this collection, you may think it's being dramatic, but when we're honest, that's really how we experience it. And when you go on a retreat, especially a longer retreat, where we don't have our usual distractions, where we let the mind go here and there and do what it wants, we really start to notice it. The mind, those habits of mind, they're looking for the fuel, and there's not as much fuel to sort of wander about in. And we really start to sense the momentum of our habit energies. And there's really no way to avoid this essential human work, which is we have to come into a skillful relationship with our conditioning, whatever it might be, whether we tend to be a defensive type, an aggressive type, a victim type, an addictive type, or all of those types mixed up. mixed together, right? But one way or another, we're some kind of type, right? We have a collection of underlying tendencies. And wishing it weren't so doesn't make it not so, or pretending we don't have those. But to start to see them and to begin to understand how to work with it. How do we work with our mind? And this brings us back to the gradual path. This is a passage, another version of the Buddha talking about the gradual path with an accountant, right? And so the accountant, this is like several talks or similar to this, where somebody is asking the Buddha to, like, is there some sort of lawful unfolding of the spiritual path in the way that you teach? And this person says, like, when a younger person apprentices to be an accountant, I have them counting first, and then on and on. And he makes a lot of other examples. When person whose home we're in, there was a logical linear process to getting this house built, and a horse trainer, someone doesn't just jump on the back of the horse, first you train the horse to accept the bit or whatever the, first pieces of the saddle might be that the person on the horse is going to use. So there's always step by step. And so the Buddha says, yeah, in the way I teach, it's also step by step. And he gives, which hopefully for now, for all of us, is becoming more familiar. So he's going to talk about this in terms of people becoming monastics. So we need to do some kind of translation. Well, what might that look like as a layperson, not, a professional meditator that monastics are, right? We're not professionals. We don't have 24 hours a day to commit to our practice because we have families, we have jobs, we have other obligations. But we can do the translation. So the first thing he says, come practitioners, be virtuous, dwell restrained in accordance with the monastic training, the code, the rules. Consummate in your behavior, train yourself having undertaken the training rules, seeing danger in the slightest faults, right? So the first thing, right, is, oh, you're interested in developing a spiritual life? Okay, so for lay people, like we've discussed in the previous weeks, we undertake the 5 training precepts. I undertake the training to refrain from killing and causing harm, right? It's a training. It won't be perfect because we live in a world where life eats life. It's a setup, but we can undertake the training, and that matters, to commit to not harming, even though ultimately it's impossible, but we can move in that direction. We undertake the training to refrain from taking what hasn't been given to us. We undertake the training to refrain from sexual misconduct. We undertake the training not to use speech in ways that cause harm, like lying or bending the truth to inflate myself, or using a harsh voice, or, talking when the words I'm speaking aren't benefiting anybody, right? Just filling up space, right? So around speech. And then the last one is undertaking the training to refrain from intoxicating the mind in ways that make me careless, so that I'm more likely to cause harm. So that's reining in a lot of our behaviors. I mean, if that's all human beings did on this planet, is sincerely undertake the 5 training precepts, the world would not be like it is. There is so much suffering that happens because we can't dedicate ourselves to this training with these 5 training precepts. So it's not a small thing. And we talked about that in the previous week, as I mentioned. And then if someone's able to do that, right, then the Buddha would train them further. Come, practitioner, be one who is guarded in the doors of your sense faculties, right? Guarding the sense faculties. On seeing a form with the eye, don't grasp at any theme or detail by which, if you were to dwell on whatever it is you're tuning into in terms of your visual experience, right, it would trigger a lot of greed, hatred, and delusion, right? Because even in this space, whether you're at home on Zoom or here in the room, there are things we could look at that would trigger aversion. And there's things we could look at that might trigger lust or greed. Or there's ways we could relate to the visual field that wouldn't trigger greed or aversion. Why would we keep looking or listening? Like if there's an irritating sound, someone who has a well-trained mind, they're not going to keep obsessing about that one sound that's really bugging them. But if our mind's not trained, we can't help ourselves. It's like we go to the thing that's bugging us. We got to get rid of it because I can't be okay. It's like one of the great skills. You sit down in a meditation hall and some fluorescent light is buzzing or something obnoxious like that. And you can really feel like it's personal, it's out to kill you, and you can justify all kinds of crazy things like, I'm going to take that light bulb off. I don't care if there's, 40 people in the room. That bulb is coming out now, or something. Oh, I can't be here. I'm just leaving. But we don't have to pay attention to that buzzing sound. I mean, there's so many things we're very happy to ignore all day long. We have the capacity. We can't possibly be aware of everything. Why are we always aware, choosing to be aware, or in the habit of being aware of what triggers greed or what triggers aversion? And that's what this guarding the senses are. It's not about controlling or getting tight. It's about understanding that there are a lot of unconscious choices being made all the time. Let's put everything on the table. Let's notice what I'm listening to, what I'm feeling in our body. Way back, this is a long time ago, I'm forgetting the doctor's name, but he wrote the first book. He's written several. Healing Back Pain. It's probably 40 years ago now when he wrote that book. But what's his name? Sarno? Sarno, thanks. But it began a whole, there's a lot now of research that basically says when we have an initial injury, let's say like in the back, maybe there's an actual physical injury, whatever it might be, but it often sets emotion away the mind starts to pay attention to the injury, to the pain. And then that pattern, like what the mind is paying attention to and how the mind is paying attention, that becomes its own thing and often becomes much more toxic, much more debilitating than the original physical injury, let's say. Because we're looking and we're hating, and then that has reverberations for the body, right? It freezes up, for example, the muscles around the injury in a way. So it really matters what we pay attention to and how we pay attention. So guarding the senses is just like human common sense. What am I paying attention to? Is that helpful? What else could I pay attention to in this moment? So why would I keep looking at that, the neighbor has a new car that you can't afford? Why do I keep looking at it every time I come home? And I look at it with greed. And the greed makes me imagine me having a car like that, right? And then I start to hate my car all the more. And it triggers all kinds of feelings of not being good enough and why not me, oh poor me. And all we're doing is creating the causes for suffering. So this is guarding the senses. That's the next thing Buddha mentions on the gradual path. And then he says, come, practitioner, be one who is moderate in eating, considering it appropriately. Take your food not playfully, not for intoxication, not for putting on bulk, not for beautification, but simply for survival and the continuance of this body, for ending its afflictions, for the support of living a spiritual life, thinking, I will destroy old feelings of hunger and not create new feelings from overeating. I will maintain myself, be blameless, and live in comfort. And this is for me personally, and I'm guessing for a lot of us, this is a powerful training for me because I definitely use food as entertainment, right? I have a hard day. When I get home, I'm going to eat something as entertainment. It's not about continuance, survival. It's about you deserve some entertainment, and let's see what's in the fridge. So to think of food, like you could just start experimenting. Okay, food is medicine. And this, what I just read, this is a version of, if you've ever been around nuns or monks, after they receive food from the lay people, because they can't have their own food, they have to be offered food every day. It's a real powerful practice for them. Then they'll chant that, basically saying, I take this food for the furtherance of my spiritual life, not for entertainment, not to bulk up, not to be beautiful, but just to maintain what health I have so I can continue my spiritual practices. And it's just sort of an interesting thing to start to bring attention to. Now, remember, these are rules for monastics, or this is like the monastic training, the Buddhist, their gradual path for monastics. And as lay people, we're doing a translation. How can I do this in a way that makes sense in my life? And now the next is really developing the continuity of mindfulness. Come, practitioner, be one who is devoted to wakefulness. During the day, sitting and pacing back and forth, cleanse your mind of qualities that would hold your mind in check, right? Unskillful qualities of mind. During the first watch of the night, from dusk to 10 p.m., you sit and you walk, and you sit and you walk. The second course of the night, right? You can lie on your right side, one foot on top of the other, mindful, alert, with your mind set on getting up, either as soon as you awaken or at a particular time, right? So generally 4 hours from 10 to 2. That's when you'd sleep. And that's true. Like when I practice at monasteries, that basically the recommendation is about 4 hours of sleep, give or take, depending, but not much more. And then during the last watch from 2 until dawn, you're back to sitting and walking practice. When the monk is one who is devoted to wakefulness, the Buddha then trains him thus. Be the one who is possessed of mindfulness and alertness when going forward, returning, making yourself alert, when looking toward and looking away, when bending, extending your limbs. Probably remember this, all the movements of the day. Make yourself alert. And then the next one, the next step on the gradual path. Come, practitioner, seek out a secluded dwelling, a wilderness, shade of a tree, a mountain, a glen, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, right, a cemetery, a forest grove, the open air, a heap of straw. One seeks out a secluded dwelling. Okay? One sits down, crosses one's leg, holds one's body erect, brings mindfulness to the fore. And then the next thing he's going to say is going through paying attention to the mind and abandoning the hindrances. So abandoning wanting, right? Because we have learned as practitioners how we're feeding the wanting mind and how we can weaken or starve the wanting mind. And this goes back to like what we pay attention to, even like when we're sitting in meditation, of course, we're not looking around or hearing a lot of things or touching a lot of things, but we can, what's coming up in our mind. And we start, when we get enough momentum in a practice, we'll see the off ramp before the mind takes the off ramp into thinking about what I'm going to order on Amazon or what I'm going to do tomorrow or whatever it is. We'll sense the off ramp and we'll say, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't have to go there. But we have to see the off ramp to not take the off ramp, right? We have to sense that inclination of the mind. And so when we use something like mindfulness of breathing, and then hopefully when we get a little momentum with mindfulness breathing, it's mindfulness of breathing infused with the pleasant quality of seclusion, which begins to mature into real ease, real peace, real stillness eventually as the mind concentrates. Then we'll catch those off-ramps much sooner. But the next step in the gradual path is developing the skill to rid the mind of hindrances. And that's where we're a busy practitioner. You know, the image the Buddha uses is the cow herder when the big herd of cattle are walking through very narrow paths, and the cow herder has to keep keeping them on the path, tapping them this way, tapping them that way, because if they go into the fields, they're going to crush the crops, and the farmer's going to beat up the cow herder. So we're busy. No, don't go there. No, don't go there. But that's okay. It's like a parent. If the kid is in a place where the kid could get hurt, the parent's going to be really active, really alert, doing what, no, you can't play with that. Don't touch that. You know, where they are, you know, that has been kid-proofed. So the parent has to be really vigilant. But then later, when the hindrances are abandoned, then, and this is what I wanted to talk about tonight before the small groups, right? Then we can develop deeper states of concentration, and that's where he's going from here. And I'll leave it there so I can talk about those deeper states of concentration. So hopefully you've taken a look at the book, most of you. I think because it's just such a short and clear review of the four jhanas. So not so much in the very early text, but then later in the tradition, there's this place called axis concentration. It's just describing the mind that has abandoned, free of the hindrances, as a particular place. So they give it a name. It's called axis concentration. And the truth is, we probably all have experienced axis concentration. And the truth is, our mind's not really good for much unless we have something in the vicinity of axis concentration. Because not having axis concentration, at least, means the mind is engaged and tangled with one of the hindrances, like dullness. Remember the 5 hindrances. This is a good list to know. Entangled with dullness, entangled with restlessness, entangled with doubt, with a mind that wants something to be different than it is, or wants to get rid of something, aversion, which is, of course, 80, 90 plus % of the time, our mind is entangled with the hindrances. That's just how it is. That's why we're tired at night, because our mind has been pushed around, tugged this way, pushed that way by these different forces, these habits, greed, hatred, and delusion, and how they manifest. I shared a link to this article, which is just a chapter from Bhikkhu Bodhi's book. He's a Western monk, The Noble Eightfold Path. I'm guessing that Shelley will use this a lot when Shelley teaches the Eightfold Path later this fall. But this is a section from the chapter on concentration, which is samadhi. That's the word for concentration. Samadhi, as wholesome concentration, collects together ordinarily dispersed and dissipated stream of mental states to induce an inner unification. The 2 salient features of a concentrated mind are unbroken attentiveness to a present moment object and the consequent tranquility of the mental functions. And here now it's really important to understand that the tranquility isn't something that the mind goes out and gets. The tranquility arises because the mind has ceased doing what it normally does. Worrying, wanting, fearing, doubting, comparing, analyzing. So all the mind has to do is cease doing that. And the way that we help the mind cease doing that, we give the mind something to do to keep it from doing what it's conditioned to do. Honey, can you pay attention to the breath coming in? Or honey, can you be aware of the attitude of loving kindness? Can you keep loving kindness in mind? or the experience of walking, or hearing the sound of the blower. It's actually not that hard. Once the mind is trained, it starts to like. It's a little bit like, I never really understood it. I never had a dog, and I don't know if this is even true, but I've just heard that dogs that have to stay at home for a lot of hours, they kind of like having their own little cage or little place, just to keep them from being neurotic. So sometimes I guess people put them in a little, I don't know what they call them, but what are they called? Crate. Cage is too negative. Um, but it's true, like sometimes we'll feel like, oh no, if my mind's crazy, it just needs something to do. And sometimes people get up and wash dishes, or they'll have a hobby that they pull out because their mind is a mess and it's going to go into dangerous territory, like think things it shouldn't be thinking, do things it shouldn't be doing. So we give the mind something to do. Why don't you go do a puzzle? Or go to your novel, or whatever it is. But we can make this a real art, a real science, actually. And this is where we use sort of a meditative object. And it's not so much about the breath, as one example. It's about what the mind isn't doing because it has an unwavering attentiveness to the breath. So we're starting to realize the mind that isn't getting pushed and pulled by all the things it would otherwise be pushed and pulled by. That's the mind we generally don't know. And that's what, Bhikkhu Bodhi is talking about, this gathered, collected, because when the mind is getting pushed and pulled by its habit energies, it's getting dissipated, scattered, dispersed. So that's the mind we get familiar with. And when the mind is gathered, it's not being dissipated. It has a lot of power, a lot of brightness, a lot of stability. It's like a different altered state, samadhi, but it's quite natural. It's not actually like otherworldly. It's just the mind that isn't, it's like the normal mind that isn't being dissipated. This is the experience of a mind that's gathered as opposed to a mind that's scattered. And in the small groups tonight, you might want to think about times in your life where you naturally experienced a gathered mind. There's a beautiful example from a book I read a long time ago, uh, Willa Cather's book, My Antonia. Anybody read that book? Sweet book. And this is just a natural time when this kid experiences this unified mind that I'm talking about. So if you don't know the story, it's about a family on the prairie in Nebraska, I believe, back probably, anybody know, late 1800s, maybe, something like that, after people had sort of broken through the sod in the prairie and were starting to farm there. Grandmother swung a bag of potatoes over her shoulder and went down the path, leaning forward a little. The road followed the windings of the draw. When she came to the first bend, she waved at me and disappeared. I was alone with this new feeling of lightness and content. I sat down in the middle of the garden, where snakes could scarcely approach unseen, and leaned my back against a warm yellow pumpkin. There were some ground cherry bushes growing along the furrows, full of fruit. I turned back the papery triangle sheets that protected the berries and ate a few. All about me, giant grasshoppers, twice as big as any I had ever seen, were doing acrobatic feats among the dried vines. The gophers scurried up and down the plowed ground. There in the sheltered draw bottom, the wind did not blow very hard, but I could hear it singing its humming tune up on the level. And I could see the tall grasses wave. The earth was warm under me, and warm as I crumbled it through my fingers. Queer little red bugs came out and moved in slow squadrons around me. Their backs were polished vermilion with black spots. I kept as still as I could. Nothing happened. I did not expect anything to happen. I was something that lay under the sun and felt it, like the pumpkins. And I did not want anything to be any more, to be anything more. I was entirely happy. Perhaps we feel like that when we die and become a part of something entire, whether it is sun and air or goodness and knowledge. At any rate, that is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great. When it comes to one, it comes as naturally as sleep. So I think it's important, like just in terms of wise, beautiful conversation topics to have with our Dharma friends, just to share moments when the heart mind gathered in an organic way, not dissipated, not entangled with greed, hatred, and delusion of some variety, but free of the hindrances. And just the world sort of comes alive. I mean, another related topic is like the experience of joy energetically, psychologically. What is our experience of joy? What is that experience? Not the thing that caused the joy or maybe triggered the joy, but what is the actual experience of joy? For me, I've really studied this in my mind, in my experience. And one of the causes for joy, because we experience joy in so many different moments. And it's something like when I'm operating from a self-centered point of view, motivated by greed or aversion mostly, right? Like Gil Franco says, they're really the caffeine of our existence, greed and aversion. But it freezes things up. But when there's less of those hindrances dominating the mind, then the moment expresses itself as movement. Just things happening minus the friction of greed, hatred, and delusion. So that's that sort of bubbly, uplift, even gleefulness of rapture, of joy. Piti is the Pali word. And it's really the first level of what it feels like to have a gathered mind. Because as the mind is free of the hindrances, then that's the mind that is what's going to sort of dominate the perception of that mind is how everything is alive with movement, minus the friction. You probably sense that sometimes, like where it's really distinct is when you've been on a retreat for a while, and then you get in your car and you drive home or something like that. And just everything just feels more vivid, more alive, more colorful, more bright. Or there are other times too where people have that experience. But where we tend to notice is when we've been sort of sensory deprived, because then it's a new experience. Or sometimes when people travel, they're in a new place, so but it's not that it's so special there as opposed to where you live. It's that your mind doesn't have its usual things to react to. Everything's new. The quality of interest is more, and awe is just more organic in those times. So you might have memories from your own experience. It'd be nice in the small groups to share, like, where have you experienced that kind of rapture? And rapture as a movement in our heart, it has a real physical component. I have a good friend who I went to India with way back 30, 40 years ago, and we've sort of stayed friends off and on over the many years now. He's quite old, he's like 88, wonderful guy. And but we were just talking a couple of weeks ago, and he was just saying about he's been meditating for a long, long time. And he was just talking about the rapture. It's like, I noticed like all this hair stands in the back of my head when I'm meditating. He's not a Buddhist practitioner, but a long, long time meditator. And so I explained, oh yeah, that's just rapture. That's what happens when you start getting some momentum and the mind is concentrated. The hindrances are not active in the mind collects, and in that power, that sort of sensitivity that comes, that unwavering presence, the heart just experiences things being alive. And the response in the heart and body is of joy, rapture. Wow, wow. Right? It's like awe. You see that with children sometimes. It's like it can't contain itself, the energy. And then that can settle into sukha, which is a more like, because there's so much joy, because the heart is so present, this contentment starts to grow like nobody needs to go anywhere. This moment is suitable or complete or full. Don't need things to be other, right? So it starts to extinguish a lot of the need for things to be other. And that leads to this more refined and beautiful kind of happiness. Sukha is the Pali word. And it matures into a deeper, resonant contentment. And we actually feel energetically when the mind is dominated by sukha, we really feel held. And in the chapter in Lee Brasington's book on the jhanas, this is one of the jhanic factors, sukha. We need to recognize this. You see this, I did it a little bit during the guided sit tonight. It's part of the Buddha's 16 steps in the Anapanasati, the mindfulness of breathing sutta discourse, to breathe in and to train the mind to notice sukha as you're breathing in, and to breathe out and notice the sukha, that sense of ease or contentment. We have to get to know these beautiful qualities of mind. And the more we get to know them, then what's going to happen is it's almost like sets in motion a natural process, because the mind starts to get interested in the pleasure of concentration. And that pleasure just takes the mind into deeper and deeper states. Nobody concentrates their mind. Concentration is a natural process. And the proximate cause, or the necessary thing, is to be present, right? The continuity of present moment awareness. When the mind is present, then it's not distracted by greed and hatred. And in that continuity of presence, it starts to feel good. And because it's being present with what's here and now, it's going to be aware of that it feels good. And that's going to feel even gooder. And on, like that. It just gets more and more refined. And that's the feedback loop that leads to the deeper states, which in Buddhism we call jhanas, where the mind really gets absorbed. What is it getting absorbed in? It's getting absorbed in the wholesomeness, the pleasure, the spiritual pleasure, you could say, of a mind that is having a vacation from what normally pushes it around, reacting with greed and hatred, greed and aversion, which includes the whole range. Boredom is a kind of aversion. There's just so many subtle versions of greed and aversion that we probably wouldn't think of as greed and aversion. But when we get more sensitive, we see, oh no, it's a contraction. It's tight. So hopefully that's enough for the small groups, just to, talk about that. Of course, anything related to the course thus far, we talked about moderation with eating. We talked about guarding the sense gates. We talked about the precepts last week. Shelley talked about the hindrances, of course. So anything that seems relevant, and you can always pass. So I need to organize the people on Zoom.